Today is Monday, December 13th, 2021 for our Warren County Employee Oral History Project. My name is Tori Otten and I am the Archival Specialist at the Warren County Record Center and Archives.
My name is Jennifer Baker. I am the Deputy Archivist.
And if we could just have you introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Bonnie Ariss, A-R-I-S-S.
Perfect. So for some background information, when and where were you born?
I was born in Newcastle, Indiana, January 14, 1944.
1944. And did you grow up there or did you grow up elsewhere?
I grew up in Lebanon. We came here when I was 5 years old.
Okay. And have you lived here since then, or have there been other places you've lived?
We, when Tom and I got married, he was transferred to Xenia, and we lived in Spring Valley for a short period of time. I want to say maybe 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then we came back to Lebanon, and we've been here ever since.
Nice. So what jobs did you have prior to working for Warren County?
I worked at Lebanon Citizens National Bank, and before that I worked at the Lebanon Public Library.
Okay. So thank you for that. And so now we'll ask some questions regarding your time working for Warren County.
Okay.
So which department did you work for while you were here?
I worked, my mom was the sheriff's secretary, and I did clerical work for her and whoever else needed clerical work done.
And which sheriff were you working under at that time frame?
I volunteered originally with Byron Kennard. The bank was closed on Wednesdays, and I was bored stiff. So Mom said, you know, there's work that can be done there, filing and just some typing and different stuff like that. So I do have a funny story with that.
Perfect.
I worked in the old courthouse, and it was not in the best of shape sometimes. And he gave me a typewriter that was on a rolling little table,
Mm-hmm.
and I rolled it over to where the chair was, and there was a hole in the floor. So it went down in the hole, typewriter goes on the floor and breaks. And he said, "That's the most expensive free help I've ever had."
Wow.
So when did you start volunteering? Do you
I believe
remember?
it was 1963.
Okay.
That was just on Wednesdays.
Did you graduate from Lebanon High School?
I did,
What year did you graduate?
1962.
So how long did you volunteer for before you became an employee? Or was there a gap there?
There was a gap. After a while, I would have some dates on Wednesdays and stuff when I was off, so I quit volunteering there. Then let me look at my little plaque, 1969, Roy Wallace hired me part-time, and he let me work on Tom's days off, because at that point we had 2 small children. So he let me work on Tom's days off. The filing and different stuff that I did was stuff that could be done anytime.
So you're married to Tom Ariss. I
Correct.
just want to clarify for
Yes.
the video. So Tom he was the sheriff for Warren County from 1992 to 2012. Is that right?
Sounds about.
He was 16 years, so 2008.
Okay. And then he was the commissioner.
And then he was a commissioner from
2000.
9 to 12.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
Okay.
before that, he was on the State Highway Patrol.
Yes. Very interesting man,
Yeah.
which is what we learned last week, thankfully. So, how long did you then work for Warren County if you started in 1969 part-time?
I worked part-time till, I think when Roy became sheriff, he asked me if I would want a full-time job, and we went to the new jail, which was an old jail now, the one that they just moved down.
Right.
It was just built, and I moved in there, and is when I worked full-time then. And we just lived across the street, so our children would, after school, walk up Justice Drive and sit in the lobby and do homework, because I sat at the front window, so I knew that they were okay.
So, just to clarify, you worked in the old courthouse
Correct.
when you were part-time, and then you worked in the current county court building, I think is what it's
Yes.
being referred to. And you worked there until when?
In 1978.
1978.
So when you started working full-time, how many people were working full-time that were not, like how many office employees did they have?
I probably want to say 25.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of change here on Justice Drive starting in the 70s. Did you experience a lot of differences between when you first started full-time here versus later with the new courts being built?
It really didn't affect me much with
Yeah.
what I did. I
Right.
handled the front window. If somebody came in with complaints, I took a report for them, or I got them to see an officer and that sort of thing. And I did payroll and different things like that, but.
Very multifaceted.
Yeah.
You did lots of stuff. So, I guess in that case, what were some of your daily tasks and duties? Like, did you experience all those every day, or did you have other things that you?
Had other things. There was, I can remember one deputy, Farrell Baker. I don't know whether you've heard of him, but
Yeah.
he had a little twang, and he gave me an interview to type, and it was on typewriter. It was before computers. And, you know, I was naive. I didn't really know much about Warren County, and he kept talking about this incident that happened on Pack Street. And he said it was Pack Street. So I typed in the entire thing, P-A-C-K, because that's what he said. Well, it was Pike Street in South Lebanon. So I had to do the whole thing over again.
Oh, no.
You know, again, it was before type,
Yeah.
or before computers, so.
I guess that's things that we take for granted at this point in time.
That's right.
That we would have to redo the whole thing entirely. So, in what other ways did you interact with the public besides taking reports? So for the sheriff's department at that time, did you have to do anything with like the jail, or was that an entirely separate
I
entity?
did a couple of times. Roy swore me in as a deputy, so that if the matron was not available in the jail and they had a female come in and needed to be searched before they put them in jail, I went back. I only had that a couple times, but I remember. Well, first of all, I remember I had to go back one time before the females went to court. They had to shower before they went to court. And there had to be somebody in there to make sure everything was okay. And I thought, what in the world is so important that you would get into jail so that somebody watches you take a shower? It just blew my mind. But, you know, possibly they did not have that in mind. But, you know, that was just one of the funny things that happened. And then I think there was one young lady that came in, and I think she had some mental issues. But the way she looked, when they called me, the deputies called me, and when I went back there, they were giggling. And it's like, okay, this looks like this could be a man. You know, had on a skirt, you know, but it looked like a man. And they were laughing, and I thought, oh, what have I gotten into? Well, anyhow, I searched her, and it was a woman, but you know, it's just one of those things that that was the first time I'd ever done that, and it just again blew my mind that you get in jail and somebody have to pat you down like that.
I'm sure it was unexpected when you agreed to be an employee that
Exactly.
you were going to be doing something like
Exactly.
that yourself. So while you were there, was the matron of the jail Roy Wallace's wife?
Yes.
Okay. What was her name?
Hap.
Okay.
Elda, I think ELDA was her actual name, but everybody called her Hap, for happy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
So, what are some of the highlights of your time with Warren County?
Just the couple of the things, you know, that I mentioned about going back into the jail, but it was just, if somebody came to the window and they had an issue if it was something I could help them with, that, you know, that made me feel good that I could help somebody. But if it was really serious, then I got them
Right.
some, but a lot of times, at that point, there was still not a lot of road people, so if you take them off the road, then they're not able to do their job on the road, but just making sure that people feel safe, that you can help them if they don't feel safe.
Right. So, are there any memorable projects in particular that you got to help with? Like, were there any big events that happened?
No big events that I can recall. The only thing that I remember is when I started at the old courthouse, and I did work at the old jail sometimes. They just put the reports in a book on the date that whatever occurred, like an accident or whatever it was. And then if people came in to get the things for their insurance, they don't always remember that date.
Oh, no.
So it's like, okay, we gotta cross-reference, it's gotta be a name and a date, and file it under the name, not the date,
Yeah.
That just made sense to me, so I set that up to begin with, because it just made perfect sense to me.
Good news is now there are computers.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
they
yeah.
can search very rapidly.
Thank God for that.
Usually.
Yes.
Usually, from what I understand, they don't have
Yeah.
as many issues with that.
It's
Yeah.
funny how those sorts of changes
Mhm.
happen over time, because we handle the majority of the historic records, and you can kind of see those lines where it was like, this is how one, set of people did the records, and then someone else comes in and
Right.
does something very similar to that, so
Yeah.
we're always appreciative of the people who take initiative and change the way that they're done, so.
Yeah.
Yes, we have very favorite time frames of the historic records where we just greatly wish that whoever was working that time frame worked a lot longer to make our lives easier
Yeah.
now. So, did anything significant happen for the Warren County government while you were here?
The only significant thing that I can remember that happened was that Sheriff Wallace got indicted, and I still don't remember what it was actually about, because it didn't make sense to me, but there was somebody in the jail that supposedly got flowered sheets because she was gonna testify for him or something like that. I mean, Hap would have given her the sheets, but it just didn't make sense to me, and that was kind of my downfall for leaving there. It's just, it's every day, it's something different, and the people, and that they're good people. I mean,
Right.
people that are bad people and which ones are good, and so that's when I had decided to leave there. It's just, I go home, I'm crabby with my kids, and my husband's always in a good mood, so I can't be crabby with him.
So, going back to when you worked at the old courthouse as a volunteer, did you ever have to go into the old sheriff's residence or jail at that time frame?
No, I think there were a couple of times that they offered, they were serving dinner or lunch or whatever, and they offered to let me eat over there, so I did.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was interesting, but, the minute they opened up, because they could pass trays through or
Right.
pass meals through to the prisoners, it smelled to high heaven.
That's
It was
unfortunate.
awful.
Yeah.
I don't know why people would have even gotten in trouble if they knew they had to go to that jail.
No.
I mean, I wouldn't want to go to jail anyway, but.
No. We
Could
feel the
gag a
same.
maggot.
Just a setup question for the old jail, cause they've changed it so much since it was actually in use. So, the sheriff's office portion of it, if you're looking at the building,
Mhm.
that was on the left-hand side, correct?
Correct.
And was that connected to the house itself where the sheriff's family would live, do you remember?
Yes, I believe they lived upstairs. I never saw the upstairs, but, when you first walked in, dispatch was there, and then the offices were off to the right, and then, straight ahead there was a place where the detectives did their reporting and stuff. A small room, it wasn't very big.
Yeah, we've been trying to piece together exactly how the layout was of
Yeah.
the actual, office and the residence itself, so.
It was very compact, that's for sure.
Yeah, I imagine.
So, seeing as how you were at the county for some very different time frames, what do you miss most about working for the county?
I enjoyed working with all of them. You
Yeah.
know, they all had stories, you know, some better than others, of course, but, you know, just, you know, appreciate what they had to deal with when they were out on the road, you know.
Right.
I did have one time, there was a young man came in, I saw him park right next to the courthouse, and he's walking in, a nice-looking young man, he walks in and he's with the FBI. And he's asking some questions, you know, of the officers, and he gets ready to go back outside. He locked his keys in his car.
Oh,
no! You know, you think, okay, big FBI guy walking in, and he locks his keys in his car.
I'm glad he had friends,
Yeah.
that way he didn't have to sit there.
That's right. That's right. We had a locksmith available.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, in town, yeah.
So, with your experiences working for the Warren County law enforcement groupings, did you have any particular words of advice for Tom when he decided to run and once he became sheriff?
It never even dawned on me that he wanted to do that
Right.
until all of a sudden he wanted to do that. And that was fine, you know. I told him, I said that I know that there's one thing, I don't believe in hiring family. And I didn't think that was right, because you always knew if the sheriff and his wife were at odds. And that's not fair for everybody else to have to deal with, I don't think, so. But I had a good job then anyway at Kings Island, so I wouldn't have been interested anyway, but, I mean, he felt the same way, you know.
Which is so interesting, because it seems like the wife kind of, especially prior to your time there,
Mhm.
like they kind of just got put into that matron position
Yes.
because it was convenient, because
She cooked the meals and everything.
Right.
And I know I had, my cousin, David O. Smith, I don't know if that name rings a bell to you, but he worked for the commissioners, and I can't remember what his title was, something administrative. But I remember I was at Kings Island, you know, and he called me and said, Bonnie, I just can't imagine you being the matron down there. And I said, well, it's a good thing, because that isn't gonna happen.
So was the matron still in charge of cooking and stuff like that during your time?
When Roy was there, you know, and they expanded the kitchen and stuff, they hired cooks.
Okay.
And then there was one gal that, at the point where the new jail was built, there was a kind of a little apartment there, and they were gonna have that, like, for visiting officers, if they had to drop or come and pick up a prisoner that we had of theirs or whatever. And it ended up, then the main matron, I guess you would say, that was the head cook, she got to live in that apartment. So it was just, you know, basically a bedroom, a little alcove that could be, you know, with a couch and
Right.
a bathroom. So,
Which is still interesting to
Yeah.
me, that people lived
Yeah.
on site
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
prior to the new jail, and even in that one, because the infirmary was the same, where the family lived on the premise
yeah,
of the infirmary, so.
Well, same with the children's home as well, they had their own apartment inside the children's home,
oh, yeah.
the superintendent and matron of those.
Well, in this way, if an officer brought a woman prisoner in at night, at least they could wake her up and have her search them before they put them in the jail cell.
So then in the approximate 13 years between you leaving the sheriff's office and Tom being elected, by the time that he became sheriff, was there any form of matron left? Or had that been done away with in that
I think that had been
timeframe?
done away with. I think by that time they had female officers back in the jail, I believe.
Okay.
Can't swear to that, but I believe they did, so
I
that
think he
would be
mentioned
taken care of.
making that a priority when he started, was
Yeah.
more female
Yes.
officers, so
Yes,
that probably makes sense.
yeah.
So then, if you don't mind, we'd like to talk about your mom, since she also had
Oh,
some
okay.
experiences here.
Okay,
So, for the record, your mom's name was Opal O'Kelly, correct?
yes.
Yes. So, Opal O'Kelly also worked for the sheriff's office. Which sheriff did she work for, or multiple sheriffs did she work for?
She worked for Buster Kennard and Roy Wallace.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, she and Buster had gone to school together
Okay.
down in Kentucky. So, you know, they knew each other, but, I can't remember. I kind of think he went in around the time Kennedy went in.
Mm-hmm.
And she had worked for attorneys in town for years, and he asked her if she would be interested, and she said yes. So she,
Yeah. And then, was that while you were a child still that she worked for him?
no. When I worked at Lebanon Bank when,
Oh, okay.
well, I think I worked at the library before that, because I worked there in my teens.
Right.
And then when I graduated, they hired me full-time, but
Okay.
I got the job at the bank, and when we were off on Wednesdays, it's just, okay,
Yeah.
I need something to do on Wednesday.
I understand. My mom also worked for LCNB and was off on Wednesdays.
Oh.
So, and then I had a question. It just slipped right out of my brain.
So what brought you guys to Lebanon then, when you were a child?
My dad got a job at NCR.
Oh,
He worked for a munitions plant in Indiana, and I don't know how all that worked out, but that he got the job at NCR, and so that's what brought us here.
Do you have any siblings?
I have a brother, an older brother and a younger brother. My older brother lives in Michigan, which is an Ohio State fan. I feel sad. And my younger brother now lives in Indiana.
Yeah. Anybody go into any form of law enforcement?
No.
No?
well, so just Lebanon in general, from the time that you guys moved here when you were a child till even the time that you worked for the new sheriff's office, are there any big changes that you remember about just Lebanon in general? I know there's
Just the growth. I
Yeah.
mean, you know, before it was just little shops downtown and kind of small, and then all of a sudden it just exploded.
right.
Yeah.
Because we've done exhibits on the old infirmary, when that was a farm. Do you remember any of that part where the health department is now? So this area prior to it actually being
Yeah.
developed, we're always curious.
Now, when I was in high school, I dated a guy, his parents ran that. It was like an old person's home.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I went out there one time, and it was real, I only saw the main floor, but it was really nice, and they, you know, I would see people sitting out on the porch, you know, and they seemed to be healthy and happy, you know, but, I mean, I went, and when in, they were inside, I never saw them, but I was only there a couple of times.
What was his name?
It was Glenn and, Lintner, Lintner,
Okay.
Mildred,
Okay.
Glenn and Mildred ran that.
So since you went to Lebanon High School and Lebanon City Schools during that time frame, did you ever interact with any of the children from the children's home?
Yes, we, at one point in it was high school, maybe freshman year. We went to school out at Otterbein. There was a building out there, and I can't remember who's in there right now, but there was a building out there, so that, you know, they needed to build another school to take in everybody, but we would take the bus out there, a school bus out there, and they would stop at Maryhaven and pick up, you know, the kids that were there, and we would go out there. So there was, I know, one kid, of course, his parents ran the place, but Jim Leake, he used to be a Lebanon police officer, and I think he lived out there because his parents ran it. but there were other kids too, but I don't remember names.
It's always nice for us to be able to talk to someone who has had experience with these places, because it's the same situation of our location here, how Jennifer described that our office, we don't know where it was. We have original blueprints for a lot of these spaces, but we don't know what happened to them over the years, or where the children were. We have the government record portion. We don't have the story of what actually happened while people were there, which is the very human-making aspect of it that people always find interesting.
I was sad when they decided to tear that down, because I guess I think everybody should be able to make repairs and it's gonna be okay, because those kids need someplace to be.
We had seen some photos of that building prior to them tearing it down, and we talked to some of the individuals who work for facilities who were here. And apparently you could walk into the lobby, and the third floor, you could look straight out the ceiling from the lobby, which is why it had to be torn down, unfortunately. But it was such a beautiful building.
It was.
From the outside.
Yes.
So, but that part is always interesting to us.
So did your mom have any stories from when she worked for the sheriffs?
None that she ever told me. She might have had some, but she never told me.
Did she enjoy that
I think she did. But most of hers was secretarial work, so I mean, she didn't ever pat down anybody or anything like that. So.
Did she work out of the old courthouse and then the new jail as well?
And then in the new jail. Yes.
What was it like opening the new jail?
It was in a way overwhelming, because you're in this little compact place, and then all of a sudden you've got all this space, and then county court was next door or across the hall, and got to meet those folks. And sometimes again, I sat at the front window, and it blew my mind sometimes when I see halter tops and short shorts coming into court. You know?
Oh,
I didn't think about that part.
Yeah. It's like, have a little respect.
Did you see a lot of the same people over and over for the courts?
I really didn't pay that much attention. I would just, if I looked up and saw somebody in shorts and a halter top or something that very inappropriate, I would take that in. But I didn't want people to think I was, look at that lady over there, she's looking at us, thinking we're bad people.
So in that regard, did you have to interact at all and tell them that their clothing wasn't appropriate? I know that happens now in some of the court systems, where they'll hand people other clothing, especially in the juvenile court system.
I didn't know that, but since that wasn't our bailiwick, I never said anything. But I would have thought, whoever checked them in, when they checked in would have said something to them, but maybe they were afraid too. Maybe it was a bad person.
I don't know.
You never know.
So you said you worked at Kings Island after? How long did you work there for?
I worked there for 25 years.
Wow. So what did you do?
Started out, I worked with what was called the litter getters, the kids with the pan and brooms that swept up at the park, and they were a delight to be with. And then I went to park operations, which included rides and entertainment, and then I ended up in marketing.
Because we were talking about Lebanon just kind of blowing up, which Kings Island's not too far from here. So that was probably a pretty big deal in this area, because they're about to celebrate their 50th anniversary in 2022. So what was that like when the park opened?
It was a lot of fun. There were times that especially, I got to walk out in the park, check on the litter getters, make sure that they're doing their job rather than just talking to other kids, which they did anyway. I mean, that was good. That was okay.
It's like the teenagers.
But when I was in marketing, you had to make sure that all the signs are where they need to be and all that kind of stuff. But it was fun. But The worst part about it is I wore heels to work and to walk out in the park,
No.
you know. But, you know, it was what it was.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the people that worked there.
Well, I guess in that regard too, you were very close to the old powder factory.
Yes.
Was there ever, I don't know how I'm trying to phrase this question. Was it as popular of a tourist destination in the 70s and 80s as it was in the 2000s, of people going ghost hunting and this and that? I heard from individuals who lived in the area in the 80s that teenagers would go and try to hang out down there and scare each other. So, just curious if Lebanon kids did that too.
I never heard much about that, and it's like, my mom was pretty strict, so it's like there was no way in heck I was gonna be doing something like that, you know. But I really never heard much about the powder factory. I just knew it was there.
We interviewed a gentleman whose family lived in the church that's on Kings Island's property when he was a kid, so he had some interesting stories.
He was delightful.
Yeah, his name is Clyde Baston, and he was
Oh,
actually, do you know who I'm talking about? Yeah, he volunteered for the sheriff's department as well. So,
yes, he did.
He said that his windows were blown out from explosions from the powder factory all the way down there, so.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yes.
I hadn't heard that. I haven't seen him in years, but he's a good guy.
Yeah, he was really amazing.
He was so sweet.
Yeah.
Because he was one of the first people we interviewed in our oral history project. Is there anything else that you can think of that would, anything else that was truly memorable about your time here, or that was very interesting that you don't think happens today? Because that's something else we're trying to figure out, just how operations kind of changed over the years.
Yeah, I'm kind of sure that the thing that impressed me was there, you know, it is a political area, and everybody seemed to get along. It wasn't like something that, you know, I'm not gonna do this because you're a Republican or you're a Democrat, you know, I'm gonna, you know, everybody worked together. I'm sure they still do that, but I don't know. But, I mean, if you worked at the bank or the library or whatever, you have to get along with everybody. Or NCR, you know, you gotta get along.
Well, and then just transitioning a little bit, so being a sheriff's wife, were there certain public duties that went along with that you had to participate in?
We were on the go a lot, but I enjoyed it because you met the people, and then, and as you probably well know, Tom's does well with people, you know, and,
He was wonderful.
His name came up a lot when we were discussing these oral histories to make sure we got him in here
Yes.
to interview, so.
appreciate that, but, you know, I mean, we went to a lot of dinners and, you know, a lot of, little events that different, you know, little towns had or whatever, and I enjoyed that, you know, to really get to see the people, and it was so much fun. Sometimes there was certain places that I wouldn't feel bad, but it's like, okay, we walk in, and all of a sudden there's people up there grabbing Tom and taking him someplace, and it's like, where am I supposed to go? But that was kind of neat, you know. He just, he's such a good guy. I've been blessed. So, and I think Warren County was blessed to have him.
That's what everyone has told us that we've talked to, is how wonderful it was for the time frame that he was here. So it seems to be the collective community impression of Tom's time.
Well, thank you.
So, do you happen to see a lot of the same individuals you saw in that time frame at a lot of these events still?
We do. We still go to a few events. We don't go as much as we did before, but we're not as young as we were before either. But yeah, there's so many neat people out there, and probably we would have never met them had we not been into politics. So that's what's so neat.
Warren County is very much a tight-knit community in certain aspects of it.
Yeah.
And you can definitely always find someone to be helpful in those communities, which has been very wonderful for us.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you can think of that you'd like to tell us about your time, or your mom's, or Tom's, or?
I really can't think of anything that I haven't already told you. It was, you know, I enjoyed all the jobs that I had. Some days more than others, like anything else. I'll have to tell you an LCNB thing. This lady comes in, I worked in the loan department. She came in, she sold her house, and she wanted cash. She wanted me to cash this check, and I said, oh, you know, it's a house. So how about we put it in your checking account so you don't lose it or anything like that? And I'm young and dumb, and she says, my husband will kill me if I don't bring this money home. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if I don't give her money, she's gonna get killed. And I gave her the money, and I asked somebody to check my figures to make sure that I've given her enough money, and I was $1,000 short. So after we balanced, it's like, oh crap, I hope she's not dead yet. So, you know, I called her up and said, you know, I didn't give you enough money, and come to that side door and just tap on it, and I'll let you in and give you your money. And so she did, but, you know, young and dumb, you know, scared to death that something was gonna happen to her because of me.
Well, I'm glad that she was okay.
Yeah, yes.
Well, on that note, I believe that we have all of the information that we need.
Okay.
So if there is nothing else you would like to say for this, then we will conclude the interview. Thank you so much for helping
Well,
us.
thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Wonderful.
Thank you.